The Fall of Hyperion. We already did Hyperion, and that book was excellent. Moving on to The Fall of Hyperion, considering that Hyperion ended on a massive cliffhanger, the first question on everybody's mind when it comes to The Fall of Hyperion is probably, does it stick the landing? No. Actually, to be fair, I should say, some things do. So some things are wrapped up extremely well and satisfyingly, and some of it's great. But all in all, it's not, it doesn't, no, it doesn't. And it doesn't feel like the sequel that a book as good as Hyperion deserved. First things first, let's get into how the gripe and the complaint and just the bad. Last time on Hyperion, Cantos, I discussed the framework being the pilgrimage, the stories, the Canterbury Tales-esque. But that story being done, that framework could not be recycled. It couldn't be done again. Now that's over, now we're here, now we need to move forward. So with that having such a specific framework that it functioned within, does this one now just move forward as a linear story from that point? In which case that has this weird added layer of style that this one doesn't get, and this just gets to be a straightforward story, in which case it probably wouldn't feel like it clicked with the first one. So now you're stuck between, you being Dan Simmons, are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do you just make it a straightforward story, or do you try to invent a new framework, a new gimmick for this story to function within, to make it feel unique in a similar sense to the way that the first one felt unique? That is a trap that he found himself stuck in. So he creates a new framework for this one, and it's not good. In order to create that framework, he has to create an entirely new character. One that doesn't come from the previous books. One that wasn't developed or built, or you're not prepared for in any sense. And that's not to say that they're bad because you're not prepared for them. They're just bad because they're bad. They're bad because you don't care. They're bad because you have no reason to care. And then you're going to spend the vast majority of the book with this character that you don't give a shit about. Maybe not a vast majority, but at least half. I mean, at least half of the book is with this new character that you couldn't care less. No way. You know, it felt like the story that people cared about, the story that people came here for, the one with the pilgrims and the time tombs and all this stuff that we had built up, all these expectations, all this excitement that you had developed over the course of the last book that you're now here for. This is what we're here for. It felt like he had about maybe 200 pages, if that, like 150 pages of that to finish up the story. Well, we can't have a 150-page book after Hyperion. We need 400 or 500 pages here, so let's start just kind of, well, we'll just kind of invent this over here, and then we'll just, although, I will say, in this book, there's like a story of what's happening with the pilgrims and in the time tombs, and then there's kind of like a political battle between the hegemony and the ousters that's playing out on a big galaxy-wide scale. And it was set up in the last book, but you don't have, with your real main focus, or your interest being focused mainly on the pilgrims and the time tombs, and that has to do with the greater overall battle. And it's all really going to come to a crux on these pilgrims and what's happening down here. But you know, you have no way of knowing what's happening up here. So through the lens of this new character, you get your point of view of what's happening here. And that being said, you get to see Gladstone, which is basically the leader of the hegemony. In the last book, I said the characters weren't good. I didn't like any of the characters. I like Gladstone. I do not know why. I do not know what it is about her. She might be, other than Father DeRay, my favorite character. So as much as this new character I thought was just a complete and utter waste of space in this book, you're in to see Gladstone and what Gladstone is and what she's doing. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they could have made Gladstone the other point of view character and left this one out entirely, and the book would have been infinitely better for it. I know it feels like I'm ranting on this, but I'm sorry. So, that prose. I brought up the prose the last time, and it is identical. So if it was a negative for you before, then it's going to be a negative for you again. If it was a positive for you before, then it's going to be a positive again. For me, it was just a non-issue. It didn't add or detract. But the prose is that real flowery and poetic speech that flowed through the last one flows right through this one. So none of that is going to change. Back to that world building. I raved about the world building in the last one. It does not falter here. If anything, it gets better. He just continues to steadily build and expand upon and explain more thoroughly or give you more bits of detail here, more information there. The Farcasters and the Technocore, all of the lore just gets a little bit deeper and it gets a little bit better. And there's just some real heavy stuff. There's some real heady stuff. This is why that other character was so disappointing. Everything that you wanted from this book, you get it. It's wonderful when it's wonderful. Although one caveat to that is there's a part of the world building that, I don't know if it's considered world building, but that's not the point. A character has something, wink wink, that affects them deeply. And it's a big part of the first book and a small portion of this book, and then it just stops suddenly. And there's no reasonable explanation whatsoever that it should stop functioning the way that it has functioned the entire time. And it has always been a source of a little bit of tension. A little underlying, just kind of unease that it adds to certain people, certain characters. It was kind of the heart of the entire horror aspect of the horror part of the last book. And in this one, they're just like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. That was just for the effect of chapter 1 of the last book. The item is still there, but it doesn't do anything anymore, right? Why would it? It's only done it for the past book and a half. Anyway, that was an issue for me. Why? Why is it? Why, Dan? You over-explained so many other things, and then that you're like, meh. I understand it's a nitpick, but I still took issue with it. What else do we have here in the notes, sir? Did I say the characters are the same? I said in the last one that the characters were not great. They're just, nah. They weren't, I didn't like them. But the characters are I guess what I'm saying is everything from the last video that I said about character and them just being, I didn't like them. They weren't bad characters, but they weren't great characters. Nothing about them generally stood out. I had a couple people that I liked. Basically, everything I said from the last video about character still applies to character, other than the fact that they added a whole lot more of Gladstone in, and they really gave her stuff to do, and they created her, and I thought she was good. I liked her. And the ending. you know, last time we didn't get an ending. We got a cliffhanger. It just kind of, story just kind of stopped. Now here is another place, once again, credit where credit is due. This is another place where this book really shines. The ending is just really spot on. It's excellent. It works on just about every level. It works for your characters. It works for, you know, it's satisfying. It wraps up in an extremely satisfying way your tales for your pilgrims, your tales for the war, your tales for the ousters and the hegemony and Gladstone, and everything gets an ending, and it's satisfying. I mean, I won't say that everybody gets there's a lot of characters here, so clearly not everybody gets a happy ending, but it's a satisfying ending. You feel, it feels right, it feels appropriate, it feels earned. It's a good, I can't say enough about the end. He clearly went into this with a vision of where it was going to start and where it was going to end. He knew the story he wanted to write as far as themes and events and where he wanted it to land, because he landed it, and he landed it right where he wanted to, or as far as I can tell, and it was good. So where did that other 200 pages of bull come from? I'll never know. But because sorry, it was that bad. It was so upsetting because the first book was so good. The second book, the ending was so good. The world building was so good. Why did it have to be ruined? I don't know, but the ending was phenomenal. It ends very, very well. It was a great, great read. It really was. I'm going to say, I'm just going to say 7. You know, with the, okay, so with the last book, it was up in the 8s. I mean, it was boy, that book was good. And this one could have been just as good, easily just as good. That character and those parts of the book were so hard to get through because they were so they weren't. Anyway, so we're going to drop this all the way down to a 7. I mean, it sucked that much out of the book that this one, The Fall of Hyperion, I'm going with a 7.